In August of 1962, a new teenage hero hit the scene in the pages of a comic called Amazing Fantasy, issue number 15. This character was Peter Parker, and his superhero identity was Spider-Man. And this video is a celebration of his 60th anniversary in comics and all of popular media. He is Spidey, the webhead, your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Happy 60th anniversary, Peter. You are an essential part of American folklore. Let's do it. Welcome back to Comic Power. My name is Comic Killer 72, and today we're going to do a special report. It's all about Spider-Man because August of 2022 is his 60th birthday.
Happy birthday!
Alright, let's get right into it. If you're going to talk about Spider-Man, you have to start with Stan Lee. To the general public, he's probably the most famous person to ever work in the comic books industry. And what I liked about him is that his look seemed to change so drastically over each decade. But Stan was definitely the man, one of the best creators and publicists for the comic book industry to make it go mainstream. He was still appearing in person live at conventions well into his early 90s. Stan is on the record saying that Spider-Man began with him wanting to create a teenage superhero with spider-like powers. But the owner and publisher of Marvel Comics was Stan's older cousin, Martin Goodman. This was the company that was founded as Timely and then Atlas and then settled on Marvel around 1961. And Goodman hated the idea. He said the idea of a teenager being a lead in a comic book was preposterous. Teenagers were always sidekicks like Robin the Boy Wonder and Batman, but not lead. He also told Stan that people thought spiders were distasteful. So Stan's teenage spider character never got off the ground at first. The opportunity came when a title that Marvel was publishing called Amazing Adult Fantasy was being canceled. So Stan said, hey, what the heck, let's go ahead and throw it in there. The publisher can't get mad about this because we were going to cancel this anyway. Issue number 15 was going to be the final issue, and it was changed to this Amazing Fantasy with the Spider-Man making his debut and rocking the cover. Remember, these were anthology comics with other stories inside of the comic as well. And the Spider-Man story within it is only 11 pages long. These pages were drawn by Steve Ditko, who stuck around to be the main artist when Spider-Man got his own title. And there you have it by the historical record, right? Spider-Man was co-created by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. But there's more. There's always more. The cover to Amazing Fantasy number 15 was drawn by Jack Kirby, and there is evidence that the design of Spider-Man and some of his influence comes from Jack Kirby. And Jack Kirby said that him and Joe Simon, who were the co-creators of Captain America, had a character called the Silver Spider that they were developing. Stan Lee admits that yes, that Jack Kirby did draw the cover for Amazing Fantasy number 15, but he thought that he drew Spider-Man too muscular, and Stan wanted him to be a much skinnier teen. So Stan assigned Steve Ditko to be the ongoing artist in this. It's been a controversy for decades if Stan was overcrediting himself and undercrediting other people. That's a whole other topic for another day. But in my humble opinion, I think that Spider-Man's creation should be credited to Stan Lee, Steve Ditko, and Jack Kirby. So in Amazing Fantasy number 15, we're introduced to Peter Parker. You know the story. Nerdy orphan is being raised by his aunt and uncle, gets bit by a radioactive spider, gets Spider-Man powers, becomes a jerk at first, but then learns that with great power comes great responsibility after the killing of his uncle, humbles himself, checks his ego, and decides to use his powers for good. This story was published in August of 1962, and it would have stayed there and been forgotten by history, except for Spider-Man was a big hit with the fans. And with that news, the owner Martin Goodman changed his mind. You know what? We gotta do a series with the Spider-Man character. He's great. But didn't you hate the idea of a teenage spider character, Martin? Oh, money. When something makes money, it always changes your mind. So Spider-Man was rushed into production, and his first issue of his ongoing title came out in 1963. It's his first crossover with the Fantastic Four, which had a hit back in 1961. And it's the first appearance of J. Jonah Jameson, who's his ongoing nemesis. The newspaper publisher who thinks that Spider-Man is a menace, not a hero. He was just a self-serving, loudmouth, peddling misinformation. So J. Jonah was sort of like the Alex Jones of his day. And the hits just kept on coming for Spider-Man. If you think about the first 20 issues of any character that was ever introduced, Spider-Man has more key issues than anybody. Don't believe me? Check this out. Starting in 1963 with issue number 1, this is Spider-Man in his first ongoing title, the first appearance of the Chameleon, and the first appearance of J. Jonah Jameson. Issue number 2 is the first appearance of the Vulture, and the first appearance of the Terrible Tinkerer. Issue number 3 is the first appearance of Dr. Octopus, and it's the debut of Spider-Man's Fans Letters page. Issue number 4 is the first appearance of the Sandman, and the first appearance of Betty Brant. Issue number 5 is Spider-Man's first battle with Victor Von Doom of Latveria. Everything is always better with more Doom. Issue number 6 is the first appearance of Dr. Connors as the Lizard. Hey, we're just getting warmed up here. Issue number 8 is the first appearance of the Living Brain and his first battle with the Human Torch. Issue 9 is the first appearance of Electro. And why is he doing this? Money! Issue number 10 is the first appearance of the Enforcers, Fancy Dan, Ox, Montana, and it's the first appearance of Big Man. Issue number 11 is the second appearance of Dr. Octopus, the first appearance of Bennett Brandt, who later becomes the Crime Master. It's the first time that Spider-Man uses a tracker on an enemy. Issue number 13 is the first appearance of Quentin Beck as Mysterio. Quentin Beck shows up in issue number 2, but he wasn't in costume then. Issue number 14 is the big one, the first appearance of the Green Goblin. It's also the first battle of Spider-Man versus the Hulk. Issue number 15 is also another big one. It's the first appearance of Kraven the Hunter. Personal note, my second grade teacher gave me a copy of this book when she found out I was interested in comics. I still have it to this day. Thank you, Miss Perkins. Issue number 16 is his first battle with Daredevil, and it's the first appearance of Daredevil outside of his own title. Issue number 18 is the first appearance of Ned Leeds, who will become the Hobgoblin in the future. He's played by this actor in the Spider-Man Homecoming movies. And issue number 20 is the first appearance of the Scorpion. This is Matt Gargan, who shows up as a cameo in issue number 19. And the hits just kept on coming for Spider-Man, but if you think of the Rogues Gallery and the important characters introduced in those first 20 issues, it's quite amazing. If you think about who Spider-Man fought in all of his live-action movies, just about all of them were villains introduced in the first 20 issues anyway. Okay, challenge. Now that you've seen that, show any character you can think of in comics that had more key issues than Spider-Man in its first 20-issue run. Speak up in the comment section if you can think of anyone, because I can't. Speaking of Spider-Man's rogues, they all teamed up in Amazing Spider-Man Annual #1 from 1964, calling themselves the Sinister Six. They were all 6 individuals who couldn't beat Spider-Man alone, so they all teamed up to do it together. There's been many variations of the Sinister Six, but the first team was Kraven the Hunter, Mysterio, Dr. Octopus, the Vulture, Sandman, and Electro. Daredevil had to be jealous at this time. Spider-Man got all of these cool villains, and Daredevil got Stilt Man. That's the best they could give him. And who are these half-ass throwaway villains? Seriously. Spider-Man got all the cool toys and Daredevil got hand-me-downs, but I digress. Any hero worth anything has to have a love interest, and Peter Parker has had 2 main ones. He's been connected to a lot of women, but his first steady girlfriend was Gwen Stacy, a real fan favorite character. She made her first full appearance in Spider-Man issue number 31. They put the trademark headband on her later, but she was introduced first without it. This was Peter's girlfriend until tragedy struck, which made room for the unforgettable Mary Jane Watson, also known as MJ. She had made cameos, but her first full appearance was in Spider-Man issue number 42, where her most quotable line, "Face it, Tiger, you just hit the jackpot." Someone took that full panel and jazzed it up, and that looks very cool. She made her first cover appearance on issue number 59 in the Go-Go Boots. There was definitely a rivalry between these 2 women over the affection of Peter Parker. Check out this sale of issue number 82 of Amazing Spider-Man, when Peter was still clearly with Gwen Stacy, and a thirsty Mary Jane Watson says, "If you're all that groovy, maybe you deserve Mary Jane." And then Gwen Stacy does a nice nasty reply saying, "When would you like him, dear? Before or after I pull your hair out?" So yeah, Gwen's pretty much telling her, if you step near Peter, I'm going to kick your ass. In the live action movies, the Mary Jane Watson character was played by Kristen Dunst. On the reboot, which I'll talk about later, the Gwen Stacy character was played by Emma Stone. Another big moment in the 1960s is when Steve Ditko, the co-creator and artist of Spider-Man, stopped drawing him after 38 issues, and John Romita Sr. took over at issue 39 going forward. And he was the primary artist for Spider-Man for over a decade, and he gave Peter that specific look that he's known for so much. You could show this picture to virtually anybody and they would know that this is Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man, even without the uniform. And in John Romita Sr.'s run, that's where Peter Parker went from a awkward nerd to the ladies' man. And I made a previous video comparing the John Romita Sr. run of Peter Parker to Archie. I think he was the same character, he just had superpowers. Archie always found himself torn between Betty and Veronica, and Peter was torn between Gwen Stacy and Mary Jane. Be sure to watch that video too, link in the description. Another huge deal was Spider-Man's first animated series, which ran from 1967 to 1970 on television. Although very low budget, it's still very watchable, and it captures the whole essence of Peter Parker and showed what made Spider-Man so cool. And it also gave us the infamous Spider-Man theme song. I would play it, but due to copyright, they always block it. But you know it. Spider-Man, Spider-Man does whatever a spider can. That brings us into the 1970s, where the Spider-Man character is now 8 years old and more than just a cult favorite, but a household name that has mass appeal with the public now. And the character starts making some ongoing appearances on The Electric Company. If you're too young to remember it, is an educational television show. And a live-action person in the suit appeared on this show from 1974 to 1977. This is where Spider-Man becomes a household name, and he's basically almost as famous as Batman and Superman already. There was also a Spider-Man television show that ran from 19 1977 to 1979. It doesn't get talked about that much because it just wasn't very good. They just didn't have the budget to make it look right, and it just doesn't work. And not only is it bad technically, it's just boring in terms of story. It was an hour-long television show where nothing remarkable happens, and then Spider-Man shows up in the last 5 minutes. So it's just meh. You can find clips of this on the internet if you want to, but it's not worth watching. Another big moment is when Marvel started running Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, issue number 1, debuting in 1976. And it would run at the same time concurrently with the Amazing Spider-Man title, so he had 2 monthly ongoing titles at the same time. And that really shows you just how popular the Spider-Man character was, because like Batman, who has his main Batman title and Detective Comics run at the same time, and Superman, who has his main Superman title and Action Comics run at the same time, you had Amazing Spider-Man and Spectacular Spider-Man both running at the same time. That's a big deal, showing that this character is so popular that he doesn't just have 1 ongoing title, but 2. Think about how many reboots a character like Moon Knight has had. He can't even keep 1 ongoing title going. Frank Castle, also known as the Punisher, makes his first appearance in Amazing Spider-Man issue 129, one of the most important anti-heroes ever. We also get introduced to Felicia Hardy, aka the Black Cat, who shows up in Spider-Man issue 194 in 1979. And is she a ripoff of DC's Catwoman? Yes, absolutely. Marvel had no qualms and no shame about it. And she functioned as an anti-hero femme fatale character that was a temptress for the hero, where she was on the wrong side of the law, but our hero finds himself attracted to her. So Catwoman with Batman, Elektra with Daredevil, and of course Black Cat with Spider-Man. They all pretty much have the same function. Of course, the biggest moment in the 1970s for Spider-Man was the moment that made everyone cry. The death of Gwen Stacy in 1973 in Spider-Man issue 121. The story is very well known and still controversial to this very day. The fans were so disheartened and shocked by the actual death of this character that they got death threats over at Marvel. You know the story involving the Green Goblin's psychopathic treachery. When Gwen is falling from that bridge and Spider-Man tries to catch her, and he thinks, no problem, I got her. But the sudden stoppage of her in free fall by the web winds up snapping her neck and killing her. Once again, everyone was very shocked. Like in Archie, would they ever kill Betty? We're going to talk about Gwen Stacy and Mary Jane Ward later in this video. Other highlights in the Spider-Man mythos for the 1970s include Spider-Man issue number 80. This is the first issue in the 1970s. Spider-Man number 86, also from 1970. This is his first battle with Black Widow, and this is her redesign with the costume we know today and the all-black tight leather outfit. Spider-Man 96 is the infamous anti-drug issue, which was released without the Comics Code seal, which was a big deal back in those days. Spider-Man 100, where he grows 4 more limbs and he has 8 legs like a real spider now. Spider-Man 101, which is the first appearance of Morbius, the living vampire, and he still got the 8 limbs at the moment. And the 8 limbs didn't last that much longer, fans didn't like it. And he fought Luke Cage in issue number 123, right after the death of Gwen Stacy. Luke Cage's character was only 12 months old, so getting this highlight in Spider-Man was good for boosting up the character. That brings us to the 1980s, and Spider-Man is more popular than ever at this time. Michael Jackson, metal, and British synth pop dominate the charts, and rap is about to break out from the underground. Peter Parker gets another animated series with Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, which runs from 1981 to 1983. He's joined primarily with Iceman and Firestar. Firestar was a new character that was created for the show. They wanted to use the Human Torch, but his rights were tied up with something else. It was a Saturday morning cartoon on NBC that was trying to compete with ABC's The Super Friends. It's an okay series to go back and watch if you can find it. But the biggest thing in comics involving Spider-Man was symbiotes, and the infamous Marvel Secret Wars number 8 from 1984, when he gets the all-black costume, which is just an awesome cover, and it is by far one of the most swiped covers ever. Look at some of these influences. Expect to keep seeing more of them because it's just such a cool pose. And believe it or not, but the black costume was very controversial when there was backlash against it, so Marvel had to come up with a plot device to get rid of it. And that was that the suit was alive and it was trying to bond with him and turn him evil and do things that were out of character for Peter Parker. The suit wouldn't let go of him, so he had to get rid of it by using the sound waves of a large church bell ringing. The suit was rejected and it wanted revenge against Peter Parker, so it bonded with someone else who also had a beef against Peter Parker, and that was Eddie Brock. And you know how this goes. Eddie Brock becomes Venom and makes his first appearance in Spider-Man 298 as Venom. This is just a small cameo vowing revenge. Then he shows up in issue 299 in another small cameo, and then Eddie Brock as Venom makes his first full appearance in Amazing Spider-Man number 300 in 1988. Alongside with these first reveals of Venom in 298, 299, and 300, is the first comic book covers and interior art by a young upcoming artist named Todd McFarlane. He becomes instantly popular with the fans with the way he draws Spider-Man's webs. He makes the eyes really big and contorts his bodies in some very weird ways, which is a callback to the Steve Ditko years. And Todd McFarlane is credited as a co-creator of Venom because he's the first artist to draw him and interpret how he's supposed to look. Spider-Man is selling more copies than ever, and Todd McFarlane becomes a superstar as the primary artist of the flagship Amazing Spider-Man for around about 29 issues. And the popularity of the Venom character is starting to explode, and he shows back up in Spider-Man number 315, which is his first appearance on the cover, issue 316, which is his first full cover, and issue 317 as well. This is the brain-eating, ruthless Venom from back in the day. I love it. Other key issues from the 1980s for Spider-Man include Amazing Spider-Man Annual number 16, which is the first appearance of Monica Rambeau, who's calling herself Captain Marvel. This is the character you saw in live action on WandaVision, Geraldine of Westview, and in the comics she's currently known as Spectrum. They'll flesh out her character more in Captain Marvel 2, now known as just the Marvels. In Spider-Man issue number 238, we got the first appearance of the Hobgoblin, who turned out to be his friend Ned Leeds. Ned, please, don't try to kill Peter in the future, okay? Got it? Good. As I stated before, Spider-Man got his all-black suit in Secret Wars. He first appears in it in his own title in issue number 252, which is a swipe of his first cover on Amazing Fantasy number 15 back in 1962. In Amazing Spider-Man issue 265, we get the first appearance of the Silver Sable. I think this is an underrated character. Female mercenaries like Domino and Black Widow get more credit, but put some respect on Silver Sable's name. She's the monarch of a small European country that borders Latveria, Dr. Doom's home. And we get another ongoing title from Spider-Man called Web Spider-Man, which started in 1985. So that gives us 3 ongoing titles at this time: Amazing Spider-Man, Peter Parker the Spectacular Spider-Man, and Web Spider-Man, all going on at the same time and not exactly in continuity with each other. And another good key from the 1980s is Amazing Spider-Man Annual number 21, where he gets married to Mary Jane. And don't forget Spider-Man issue 294 called Kraven's Last Hunt, where he takes his own life. Great storyline, but does anyone ever really stay dead in comics? Seriously. That brings us to the 1990s, and Spider-Man is more popular than ever. I always keep saying that, but it keeps being true. And Todd McFarlane is hotter than a day on the 4th of July, and he's always clashing with the editorial staff over at Amazing Spider-Man. So to pacify him and to get more revenue, they do another Spider-Man ongoing series just called Spider-Man, and they're gonna let Todd McFarlane draw it and write it. And once again, Todd McFarlane gives us one of the most swiped covers in comics ever. So if you're still counting, that's 4 Spider-Man titles: Amazing Spider-Man, Peter Parker, Web of Spider-Man, and just Spider-Man, all going on at the same time. Eric Larson takes over as the primary artist on Amazing around issue 327. And his drawing style is even more wacky than Todd McFarlane, so we're full on Ditko again, which works perfectly for the Spider-Man character. And Larson adds a wrinkle that is now a staple of the Venom character: the long, slimy tongue. This is an invention straight from the mind of Eric Larson, and thank God the editorial staff didn't nix it, because everyone associates that character with that long tongue now. Todd McFarlane and Eric Larson both left as a part of a consortium, which was the founding of Image Comics in 1992. So the primary artist for Spider-Man for the flagship Amazing title was Mark Bagley, in which we got the introduction of a Venom spinoff called Carnage. And he shows up as a cameo in issue 360. Then things get really wild, and all hell breaks loose involving Spider-Man, Venom, and Carnage, issues 361, 362, and 363. So this is the time where Venom and not the Green Goblin becomes the arch enemy of the Amazing Spider-Man. And we wound up getting more Venom and more Carnage than we ever wanted, in which Marvel gives us a 6-issue miniseries with Venom headlining. It's common today for a villain or anti-hero to headline a title, but it was very rare back in that time. I thought that Marvel was jumping the shark when they put out a 14-part crossover called Maximum Carnage. Hey, they kept putting it out, but people kept buying it, so I guess they wanted it. The other big thing in the 90s was the 30th anniversary of Spider-Man, which Marvel went all out on in 1992, and Marvel gave special edition covers to every ongoing title for Spider-Man. They were all oversized editions with hologram covers, which you're looking at right now. I never thought these would be worth any money because the print runs were very high. However, Amazing Spider-Man 365 is the first appearance of Spider-Man 2099. So that's the one that everyone wants, but it's nice to have this collection. They look pretty cool still to this day, 30 years later. They tried the Spider Armor and Web of Spider-Man issue 100 in 1993. That didn't quite catch on though. And that brings us to Prince party like it was 1999, and that brings us to the 2000s. And to keep the Spider-Man character fresh and relevant, they decided to tie him in with some real life things, such as the Amazing Spider-Man 36 with the all-black cover, which is in memoriam of 9/11. Marvel put this out just 2 months after 9/11 happened, and that's an amazing turnaround for the comic book industry. It's an awesome tribute that holds up very well to this day in honor of those we lost that day. And then there's Amazing Spider-Man 583, which is a tribute to the first black president, Barack Obama. But the biggest thing that happened for the Spider-Man franchise in the 2000s were the movies. For the first time, we got Spider-Man in a live-action movie series, with Tobey Maguire playing the lead of Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man, and it came out in 2002, and it was a huge hit. It also starred William Dafoe as Norman Osborn, Kristen Dunst as Mary Jane, James Franco as Harry Osborn, Cliff Robertson as Uncle Ben, and Rosemary Harris is May Parker. And the upside down kissing scene in the rain is probably one of the most infamous scenes in a comic book movie ever. The 2004 follow-up is still viewed by many as one of the best overall superhero movies of all time, with Peter Parker taking on Dr. Octopus and J.K. Simmons just completely owning the J. Jonah Jameson character. And once again, another huge hit at the box office. Part 3 from 2007 was a drop in quality, obviously. A strong performance by the Sandman was lost in the fact that you had emo Peter dance and trying to shoehorn Venom in with the wrong actor playing him. It was just wrong. But the Rent guy was funny. I did like the Rent guy. And don't forget about Mark Millar's multi-comic Civil War tie-in. And Spider-Man plays a major role in this conflict. Parts of the story was loosely adapted in the MCU for Captain America Civil War in 2016. In the movie, it was the Sokovia Accords. In the comic, it was the Superhero Registration Act. It was different reasons why, but it was the same idea. That brings us to the 2010s, and I'm running out of adjectives to describe just how dominant Spider-Man is in pop culture. In the comics, it's all about alternative universes and other Spider-Men and Spider-Women. In what's called the Ultimate Universe, they introduce Miles Boralus. He's a young, half-black, half-Latin teen who takes over the mantle of Spider-Man after the death of Peter Parker, making his first appearance in Ultimate Fallout number 4 in 2011. He went from cult favorite to household name pretty quickly. I ranked him as one of my top 10 favorite black superheroes of all time. I tell his full origin in that video. See the link in the description. Also bursting out with massive popularity is Spider-Gwen, who makes her first appearance in Edge of the Spider-Verse number 2 in 2014. In this alternative universe, it's Gwen Stacy and not Peter Parker who gets bitten by the spider. So she takes on the mantle of Spider-Woman with the hoodie, also known as Spider-Gwen, also known as Ghost Spider. I made a video called The Top 20 Comics of the 2010s. Edge of the Spider-Verse number 2 ranks in the top 5 in that video. See the link in the description to see her origin in that video. Another character not quite as popular as those two, but still rising, is Silk. She makes her first appearance as a civilian in the reboot of Amazing Spider-Man number 1 from 2014. And she makes her first appearance as Silk in Amazing Spider-Man number 4, also from 2014. And unlike Miles Morales and Spider-Gwen, she's actually in the same universe as Peter Parker in 616. The biggest story, of course, involves the continuation of the movies, with the live-action Spider-Man universe being rebooted and Andrew Garfield being selected as Peter Parker. And instead of the love interest being Mary Jane, the love interest is Gwen Stacy, played by Emma Stone. The villain in the movie is Kurt Connors, also known as the Lizard. Martin Sheen plays Uncle Ben and Sally Field plays Aunt May. It's an okay film, but it makes the mistake of killing Uncle Ben again. Aren't you sick of seeing Uncle Ben getting killed? Spider-Man's origin is very well known. They could have just skipped that part. They followed this up with the sequel of Amazing Spider-Man 2 in 2014, and this is where things really go off the rails. They try to tell too many convoluted stories in one movie. The Rhino in a mechanical suit just doesn't work. Jamie Foxx's Electro is just goofy. The Green Goblin looks like a leprechaun on crack cocaine. There's some nonsensical plot involving Peter Parker's real biological father. Come on, look what they did to Jamie Foxx as Max Dillon before he becomes Electro. They tried to stuff in an Easter egg that the Sinister Six was coming in a very clumsy way. The only thing this movie did well was the death of Gwen Stacy scene. You know it's coming, you know it's fictional, but it still hurts every time you see it. The film gets bad reviews and the box office is shorter than what they expected. And the most embarrassing thing is, it's outperformed at the box office by Guardians of the Galaxy. Amazing Spider-Man Part 2 with a A-list superhero was released in April 2014 and made $709 million at the box, while Guardians of the Galaxy with D-list heroes you never heard of was released in July of 2014 and made $772 million at the box office. Hold up, what the heck is going on here? Even the worst Spider-Man film is supposed to outperform some no-name heroes that no one ever heard of. People forget that the first 5 Spider-Man movies were produced by Sony on their own. Sony acquired the movie rights to Spider-Man a long time ago. How they got here is a long story. It's too complicated to explain. They just had them, okay? So all those films had nothing to do with Marvel Studios. It was all Sony. The proper MCU from Marvel Studios was rolling at that point, and Guardians was its 10th movie. And Guardians was the one that everyone thought would fail, but turned out to be one of their best movies ever. So out of embarrassment, Sony decided to do something correct for a change. And they decided to strike a deal with Marvel where they will share Spider-Man and allow him to appear in the MCU for the first time. So this is basically Sony admitting they have no idea what the hell they're doing and going to Marvel to fix it. So Marvel made the creative decisions. Sony still released the film on their distribution platform. Disney got a cut of the box office. The fans got to see Spider-Man in the MCU for the first time, so it's win-win-win for everyone. And Spider-Man makes his first appearance in Captain America Civil War, which I mentioned before, back in 2016. And Peter Parker was played by British actor Tom Holland, who was actually still a teenager when he took over the role. Unlike Tobey Maguire, who was 27, and Andrew Garfield was 29 years old. You'd never believe those guys were in high school. Come on. Spider-Man's first solo film in the MCU was Spider-Man Homecoming, released in 2017, and Michael Keaton makes his MCU debut and plays a strong role as the Vulture. And he's using alien technology that was left over after the Battle of New York in 2012, documented in the Avengers Part 1. In terms of his love interest, instead of going with Mary Jane Watson or Gwen Stacy, he briefly dates Liz Toombs, the daughter of the Vulture, which he didn't know, but his love interest over the whole arc is Michelle Jones, played by Zendaya, and they have incredible chemistry. This is followed up by Spider-Man Far From Home, released in 2019. His mentor Tony Stark has passed away due to the events in Endgame, and the villain in the movie is Quentin Beck, aka Mysterio, played by Jake Gyllenhaal, and J.K. Simmons reprises his role as J. Jonah Jameson. It's a pretty good film, but the best overall Spider-Man film to me, released in the 2010s, was animated, which was Into the Spider-Verse, which was released in 2018. It took a very complex plot that was derived from the Spider-Verse storyline in the comics, about multiple Spider-Men and Spider-Women and Spider-Pigs and Spider-Robots and Spider-Everything, and put it together in one cohesive movie. With Miles Morales being the lead character, it was a massive hit, and it won an Oscar for Best Animated Movie. Miles Morales was voiced by Shameik Moore, who made his breakout in the independent movie Dope. The Spider-Gwen, aka Ghost Spider character, also gets a big role in this film, and she's voiced by Holly Stanfield. Holly is also playing Kate Bishop in the live-action MCU, making her first appearance in the Hawkeye web series. Spider-Man 2099 made a small cameo in the movie, raising his popularity and the price on Amazing Spider-Man 365, his first appearance. The Cindy Moon, aka Silk character, did not make an appearance in the Spider-Verse film, but she's slated to appear in the sequel, which is going to be called Spider-Man Beyond the Spider-Verse, which is going to be released in March of 2024. Remember, Sony still owns the Spider-Man universe, so they put out a Venom solo movie on their own. In 2018, starring British actor Tom Hardy. I thought the film was okay. They took an R-rated character in the story and tried to stuff it into a PG-13 film. Since Spider-Man was tied in with the MCU, they didn't do the traditional symbiote from the Secret Wars storyline thing. It bonds to Eddie Brock after Peter Parker gets rid of it. But people were so excited to see a Venom who didn't suck like that Tobey Maguire Spider-Man version that they showed up for the film, and it made $856 million on just a $100 million budget. And that brings us to the 2020s, a decade so far dominated by COVID, war in Europe, inflation, political violence, and catastrophes brought on by climate change. So our entertainment fiction is a good escapism to get away from the world, which really sucks right now. In the comics, the main Peter Parker continuity is so all over the place, I have no idea what's going on either. But Amazing Fantasy issue 1000 was released on August 31st, 2022. I think you should pick that up as a memento. This is the comic series that first released Spider-Man in issue number 15 back in 1962, so this is a good salute to him. As for me, I'm watching the spin-off characters and see how they develop. The Miles Morales character is developing very well in comics. He may have found his femme fatale and arch villain and Starling, who made her first appearance in Miles Morales Spider-Man issue number 6. Whatever they decide to do with Miles Morales in the future is probably going to include this character, so watch out for her. The Spider-Gwen, aka Ghost Spider character, is also having a good run, and she just wrapped up a Gwenverse miniseries which was completely bonkers in a good way. Just look at all these different takes of the Avengers based on the Gwen Stacy character. It's really nuts. And it's an opportunity for Marvel to sell more toys. Hey, you can do anything in the Spider-Verse. Silk, on the other hand, is a lot like Moon Knight. She keeps getting rebooted back to number 1. Marvel is still looking for the right angle and the tone for this character to catch on better. The movie appearance will help. Speaking of movies, Sony was at it again with a follow-up to Venom. In this part 2, we got the first full appearance of Carnage, which was played by Woody Harrelson. Released in October 2021, it made a little bit less than the first Venom movie. Some of that probably can be blamed on COVID, with not all the theaters being open yet. I'm not that very excited about the Venom movies anyway. I want Spider-Man to fight Venom and then have to team up with Venom to go fight Carnage together. That's what I want. And then Sony made a mistake by trying to make a Morbius movie. It got pushed back several times due to COVID. This is the character that Jared Leto fell into after he was forced out as the Joker over at the DCEU. And no surprise to me that this movie bombed, only making $163 million on an $80 million budget. Morbius is a villain or supporting character. He's not a lead. It was a bad idea in the first place. But over at the MCU is possibly the best Spider-Man movie ever released. And Spider-Man No Way Home, due to some Doctor Strange magic, or should I say Peter tinkering with it, you get all 3 Spider-Man live action actors in the same movie at one time. Tobey, Andrew, and Tom. And it's not just fan service cameos, but they are an integral part of the plot, which also gives us some of our favorite villains from the first 5 Sony Spider-Man movies. Doc Ock, Green Goblin, the Sandman, and Jamie Foxx's Electro gets a much needed makeover. I swear. And hey, it's a great movie to get lost in. It takes a very complicated plot and pulls it off fantastically. And the movie made $1.9 billion on a $200 million budget, making it the 6th highest grossing movie of all time. Also coming down the pipeline is a new animated series starring Spider-Man called Spider-Man Freshman Year. They give us some more reveals about this at Comic-Con. It kind of feels like a 1960s throwback to the earlier days of Spider-Man, and Norman Osborn is going to be his mentor in this. Seriously, can't wait. I want to see this take on Peter again. So what else is in the future for Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man, in the movies, in the comics, the merchandising, all the spin-off characters? Where would you rank Spider-Man in your all-time favorite list of comic book characters? Don't you want to see that Spider-Man Venom Carnage battle as bad as I want to? I know I didn't mention every animated series from Spider-Man. There's just too many. I didn't mention the video games. They're always excellent. But hey, I couldn't make this video 2 hours long. I still would not be able to cover everything. So I'm plugging them here now. Happy 60th anniversary to Spider-Man. He's a pop culture icon. He's been entertaining us for multiple generations over decades and taught us all that with great power comes great responsibility. He is Peter Parker, the webhead, the spectacular, friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. You know the drill. Be sure to subscribe to this channel, give it a thumbs up, and share these videos on social media so others learn about the Comic Power channel. And click on the bell for notifications. It'll let you know when new videos come out. While you're here, be sure to check out other Spider-Man related videos that I made, such as which Spider-Man female spin-off character will get her own film directed by Olivia Wilde, and a video where I list who I think are the top 5 Spider-Man artists of all time. Thank you for watching. This is Comic Killer 72 for Comic Power. Out.